Hey, this is John Leon Guerrero. Our guest today is Phil Briggs. Phil is a U.S. Navy veteran who served aboard the USS John C. Stennis as a journalist and public affairs specialist. He studied broadcast journalism at the Defense Information School and at Arizona State, and worked in terrestrial radio for years before becoming a voice actor for clients that include Honda, Chevy, Corona, the Food Network, the Travel Channel, Pandora, and Spotify. He's now the host and producer of the Vet Story podcast, which you can find at connectingvets.com. So Phil is really putting his education and his experience together. He sat with our resident vets, Pete and Scott, and you get these three together and evidently the fat will be chawed. Good luck keeping these guys corralled. Please enjoy our special guest today, Phil Briggs.
Lions Rock Productions.
This is Jay
This
Moore.
is Greg Proops.
This is Jordan Harbinger.
This is Dexter from The Offspring.
This is Nathan
This is
East.
Sebastian Younger.
This is Rick
This
Moranis.
is Stuart Copeland.
This is Mick Gillette.
This is Andy Summers.
Hey, this is Skunk Baxter.
This is Gabby Reese.
This is Rob Bell.
Hey, this is John Leon Guerrero.
Hey, and this is Pete A. Turner.
This is Phil Briggs from ConnectingVets.com, and I like to be naked on the Break It Down Show.
And now, the Break It Down Show with John Leon Guerrero and Pete A. Turner.
I am now unbuckling my pants because this is my favorite kind of way to do shows.
We definitely did not want a photo, especially with that.
This is going to be our first YouTube Live. Hey, man. So, listen, we got Scott here in the studio with me, and it's always fun when we all get together, and three vets, and Scott and I have spent the whole day at the Nixon Library grabbing shows with fucking Jack Brennan. How crazy is that? And Greg Daddis, who, Scott being the guy who I type names wrong, you say them wrong.
I did.
I misspell things all the time.
It was mental block, though, because whenever you say, how do you say your name? You mispronounce it.
Right.
Inevitably. Phil knows.
Yeah, that's how it goes.
Phil, aren't you in media of some form, too? Don't you do radio podcasting? And yeah, that's
I sure do, man. Yeah. ConnectingVets.com, I do the podcast called Vet Story, and I also do a new podcast called The CV Report, which basically stands for Connecting Vets. But I came from radio after the Navy, so yeah, mispronouncing things in interviews is, my forte.
What did you do in the Navy, man? Were you a cook? Bosun's mate?
Bosun's mate, yeah. Salty sailor.
It's the only rate Pete knows. Bosun's mate? Were you bosun's mate? No, I was a pilot. So bosun's mate. Okay. Got it. Yeah. So you're saying you were on the boat.
I'm a rare breed. I got a chance to do what I did in the Navy. It used to be called JO, but now it's called MASCOM.
Right.
But I was a journalist on an aircraft carrier, and kind of cross-trained into being a photo mate as well. And I got a chance to get out of the military and go be a journalist. So
you said yes.
Yay for me! I get no retirement, and I'm underpaid. Woohoo!
Yeah, but you do get to do what you love, and there's something to be said for that.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, it was really a cool tour. I mean, I got out of the Navy after doing my 4 and out the door, and really didn't look back at first, not out of disinterest or lack of love for, my shipmates and everybody that, I served with, but it was just like, I got a job at Rock Radio and nobody cared that I was in the service. They were like, hey dude, who have you interviewed? Where's your morning show? What's your market size? And I was like, I'm out of the Navy. What's up, guys? And I got lucky, man. From that point of getting out in 1998 to a couple years later, I'm interviewing bands like the Mighty Boss Tones and Aerosmith and all the way to ZZ Top. I mean, you name it. We sat down with a ton of rock and rollers, and I kind of forged my way through morning show glory and getting fired every 4 years.
Right. I love how in the radio industry, and this is one of the reasons why I think it struggles so much now, is like you come to love Phil, the character, whatever character you play on that morning show, and then your contract doesn't renew or they just send you away, and then there's never word of you ever again, as if you didn't exist. And it's sort of a big fuck you to the fans, because you're like, hey, what happened to Phil? Like, just tell me, like, fond farewell, Phil's moved on to another station. We wish never, ever, ever another word. You get Chuck Cunningham'd every single time.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's normally after, like, some sort of, like, joke that really wasn't that bad.
Right.
But that was
like
Phil's
you
goal,
acted-
probably, is like, how can I get fired in 4 years? Within 4 years, I plan to be fired.
Right.
Because that could be your brand, Phil. Like, the most fired DJ. Now, coming up, Phil Briggs, the most fired DJ in all of radio.
When you get fired from the radio, they give you a box of shit, and then do you hum to yourself the WKRP theme song?
You should, but actually, I think I'm in competition for most fired DJ because really, in the 90s and early 2000s, we all considered Howard Stern the benchmark.
Sure.
So if I said anything on my way out, it was always like WNBC, followed by a, stiff FU.
Yeah.
I think between me and Phil and you, there's probably a really, really stiff competition on who can quote the most movie lines. But Phil has by far one of the most impressive repertoires. He could be for shit on air or doing anything, which he's not. He's great because I've been on his show. It's amazing. But your repertoire is pretty deep, my brother.
Well, I'm kind of a big deal.
I just recently got...
right there.
I love the recent Anchorman shout-out I got on Twitter from you, as a matter of fact, how you stopped watching Anchorman, Ron Burgundy, and read my book. And that was pretty cool. That was high praise coming from Phil Briggs.
I was toying. Twitter always trips me out, too. It trips me up, rather, because I want to think of the perfect thing to say in 140 characters. And believe it or not, it takes me like 30 minutes to think of like something to say oftentimes. But I went with the Anchorman reference, but the one I was going to go with was the fact that I was on the toilet till both legs fell asleep reading Echo and Ramadi.
Huge.
And this just in, Phil, welcome to 2019. There's actually 256 characters you get to use on Twitter now, so your world has expanded.
I don't freaking know, man. I don't even know.
All right, so listen, I know we're going to have fun, have a Yuck Fest, because that's pretty much what we're stuck with, because that's what we do, but let's talk a little bit about connecting vets so we can sort of pay the bills, and then I'm sure we'll get sidetracked. But I want folks to understand, because look, people all over the place are looking for podcasts to listen to. People want to support vets. You have great stories. So help me out with what is it that you guys are trying to accomplish over there?
Yeah, right on. And I appreciate both you guys because not only getting the guest chair tonight on the Break It Down show, but you were two of the first people I actually interacted with when we started up Connecting Vets. It was over a year ago, and it was the brainchild of a guy at CBS Radio named Mark O'Brien and another guy, Steve Swenson, who said, corporate radio doesn't do jack nothing for veterans. There's no specific veteran-centric, military-centric thing that's done by really most of the major networks. And I'm talking CBS Radio, CBS TV. I mean, they have their TV shows and they have their, fictional dramas and stuff, but nobody really does stuff authentic for veterans. So these two guys got together and they said, well, what could we do? And they said, well, let's make a website. Let's make a website and like a radio station that's just all veteran stuff. And they kind of, toyed around with it. And they're like, well, how does a radio station work in just Washington, D.C.? Because veterans live all over hell and half of Georgia. We can't just make it a Washington, D.C. thing where we're based. So they said, well, let's take it to the web and let's do podcasts. And they put out on, a couple different channels out there in social media that they were hiring veterans with broadcast backgrounds or with journalism backgrounds. So a couple guys like myself that, went to Defense Information School and were mass comm guys, combat camera guys, we got tracked down. I think I got a message on LinkedIn at the time. And I had already quit radio. I was out of radio. I was just doing voiceover for television commercials and radio commercials. And I just, I'd kind of given up on media because I was like, I keep getting freaking fired. This sucks. I'm just going to do my own thing. Well, I replied to this thing, and literally they called me like 2 days later and said, can you come to D.C. tomorrow? And they showed me this project that was like full broadcast studios and desks and reporters. And they're like, we want to staff this with about 8 or 9 veterans, and we just want to write stories about veterans. We want to cover veterans issues. We got a guy coming from the VA that's going to help us give advice for veterans trying to get services, but we don't know what the fuck to write about. So can you, as the guys that, have DD-214s, as the guys that went through boot camp, can you help us color in between the lines and tell the right stories? So there's like 6 or 7 of us that get started, and I start doing a podcast called Vet Story, which just chronicles really cool veterans. And that's when I ran across Scott Huesing and the book Echo and Ramadi. And I remember being in the bookstore, actually, Scott, I don't think I ever told you this. I remember being in the bookstore, and I was going to buy like 3 or 4 books that were written, by vets, combat vets or what have you, war stories. And yours was one of them, and I was like, nah. I'm like, I couldn't get that guy. There's no way I could book that. That's because it was like on the end of the row, or it looked like it was a pretty legit book, and
It's great.
It is. It's got words and everything.
Yeah, and a picture on the front.
Yeah. So I forget what I ended up buying that day, but I remember seeing that book, and that's when I came across your publisher like some weeks later, and we somehow got connected through emails and exchanging with publicists and stuff. I was like, oh man, that's the book I was just going to buy, but I didn't think I could ever book that guy because he's like, on the end cap display. I was going for like the lower shelf books that nobody wanted to read, thinking
the bargain table. Are you a bargain table? You're not bargain table.
So you realize that you can book Scott Wynn. Like how does that go down? Where you're like, actually, I actually can get this guy. When did you know?
Well, I think coming from radio, nothing was too much. I mean, I didn't really, I have no aversion talking to publicists or Hollywood agents or whoever, but I didn't think they'd buy in because we were such a small entity. We had zero reputation. We weren't Task and Purpose. We weren't Stars and Stripes. We weren't military.com. Nobody knew who the hell we were. And when they did email us back and say, yeah, here's some available times, we'd love to have him come on and talk to you, talk about the book. I remember I had him coming in one day on the same day. I had Scott come in, and I had the pitcher from the Washington Nationals coming in. And, I was revved up. I was like, man, I got 2 great interviews today. And I'll be honest, I had fun talking to the Washington Nationals pitcher, but I knew we were doing the right thing when I talked to Scott because our interview was like almost an hour. And it just went exactly the way I wanted it to. I'd read the book by then, and the stories you told, the inspiration you get. I mean, it wasn't just bullets flying. It wasn't just war stories. It wasn't war porn. It was straight inspirational at the end of the story, and the end of the hour just whizzed by. And I told my editor, I was like, we need to do more stuff like this. We need to tell more stories like this. And we need to never forget that, like, we're supposed to make the experience of being in the military understandable to people that were never in it. And that's kind of now my goal is with these podcasts is to like not just talk to my veteran community because our brothers know who we are. And my goal now is to talk to like everybody out there that listens to podcasts, every person that reads the New York Times, every person that listens to PR. You got to take a cup of this, man. You got to get a whiff of this because the stories that we can tell as veterans who went through any kind of shit, whether it was combat or whether it was just, the joy of boot camp or being stuck in the middle of, Fort Nowhere, Kentucky. The things we've done together.
Yeah, hold on. So Phil's recitation of the interview is laudatory at best, but ultimately what he got out of the entire book and the stories and all the stuff we were talking about, it totally devolved, like every military guy, into potty humor.
Yes.
So he drilled out of the one story, which was about the evolution of the wag bag, where guys take a shit in combat. And he was fascinated by that because, in the Navy, they've got polished, toilets on the ships and catered food service when they go out off the ship. And, they leave a very cushy lifestyle, especially a guy that is a photojournalist for the Navy.
Right.
He's on the inner circle. He's doing these things. So, yeah, that's what it ultimately devolved down to, but it was hilarious.
And I want to say this, too, for the listeners, so they understand exactly what combat camera is. That sounds badass, but let's be honest at what combat camera is. Combat camera guys are guys that when they go to the chow-hall, the lettuce is green, and they have a fork. Like when Scott and I go to the chow-hall, like to the chow-hall where Phil's going to eat, we're like, holy shit, a metal fork. We're just like amazed by that. And then the combat part of combat camera is that they definitely go out on a patrol, but then they get the fuck out of town as fast as they can on the next thing they can get it back to the safety and the comfort of hot showers and everything else.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and hey, Phil, I had a guy. I love my ComCam dudes, and they're now for the Marine Corps calls them strategic communications. They've elevated, and our guys. I always loved including them on patrols if they had a rifle and a camera. They could come. And I had this one guy. He said, "Yeah, hey sir, let me know if you need me to send any of my shooters out to get pictures for you." I'm like, "You mean snappers?
Yeah,
you guys are snappers, right? You snap photos. Oh, we shoot photos." I go, "No, we shoot guns.
Yeah,
you snap photos." And he thought he used that on me. Hundreds of times, never let me live it down just because I was busting his balls about it. But love ComCam.
Well, first of all, to your point, one, the really good food and the metal forks are the Air Force.
That's true.
Okay,
that's
so
true.
I had crappy food and a metal fork, so I was Navy, so I did some sacrificing. And to your other point, ComCam guys, the Native Americans believe that when you take a photograph of an individual, you take their soul.
Yes.
So I'd like to think that my body count is extremely high. I must have taken thousands of souls. There were moments when I would
stare down. The jackal?
Right?
I got 10 pictures of him.
Oh, man.
That's funny. Okay, so you guys are telling stories. Scott comes on. He blows your mind with stories about crapping and having to wear body armor and stuff. And you're right. These are this is one of the reasons why I do my podcast, is to illustrate that, one, yes, there's hard days, and Scott's calling for rockets to be sent into buildings and people are getting, the enemy's getting destroyed. But it's the humanity in between those moments, when you're laughing your ass off, having absolutely, even for a podcast, inappropriate conversations, on a patrol, trying to discuss like where the line is between being, this or that. All that stuff happens. And that's really, I think, where the interesting things are, because, yeah, there's moments where life is crazy and there's shooting and there's bombs, but it's all of the other stuff where you're a human around that inhumanity. Don't you think?
Yeah, and it's like, it was cool for me to get a glimpse of it first through Scott, but then to realize that, like, okay, I'm a pansy that's been on a carrier for my entire tour and did a med cruise, and that was about it, and got as close to war as a F-14 on a flight deck. But the guys that actually were in it are very cool, because if you meet, at the AMVETS post or at a concert or something, and two people discover that they both served, there's not an immediate judgment like, oh, well, you're uncool and I'm not going to talk to you because I did this and your service sucked because you were only in 1997. It's a club that everybody gets to belong to because we all did raise our right hand. We all would have been there for our brothers. And it's a really cool thing to be involved with and to know that there's a community out there. And what I found in reporting on it over the last year is that sense of community is what is really important to a veteran, because once you're done with deployment, once you're done with your time in service, once you're home and you're rocking dad life on a cul-de-sac in the suburbs, you don't have that tribe anymore. You don't have that group. And being a member of a veteran, being a member of the group is just, if you served, even if you would have been a discipline problem, like I would have been under Major Huesing's leadership, I seriously would have been a discipline problem. But once we're done, man, and we grow a little bit older, a little bit bolder, and a little bit more grays, just being in the club makes the world a difference. And it means that when you run into somebody that's got a veteran hat on the subway train, or you sit at a bar and you see a guy with his grunt-style T-shirt, you can look at that dude and know, hey, I might have a bro there. I want to go talk to that guy because we're kind of one and the same, even though our services might have been radically different.
Yeah, and service is service, right? Like once you raise your hand and you volunteer to go give something to your nation, and put yourself in whatever harm's way the commander needs, that's it. You're in the club. And it's, sure, Scott and I have combat time and you were on a carrier, but, if they would have told, say, Phil, grab your shit, you're going to Koner Province and you're going to go work on a PRT and go out every day, you would have done it. You would have absolutely done that. So it's not so much about like the style of the service. It's just the service in general and being able to share those moments with Vietnam vets. Heck, we talked to Jack Brenner today, and that guy's incredible. And I'm gonna interview this guy coming up, Phil. He's an intel officer from Vietnam. They're doing a documentary on him and like his position or thing, and it's just fascinating to hear that guy talk about their part of the conflict. He's an intel guy, so he didn't necessarily have to go out all the time, but still, they're in this hard fight, and you can instantly identify with, at least I can, because his job is very similar to mine, but I can instantly identify with what he had to go through. And really, this is the funny thing about conflict that I've seen a lot is how hard you have to fight the internal machine as opposed to the enemy. Like, I always spent time focused on us rather than them, because that's where all the work needed to be done.
That's the same. Yeah, there's no question. There's no question whatsoever in that. Pontifications by Pete. That could be like a whole new podcast for you, like esoteric ramblings of Pete Turner.
let me ask you.
In the veteran community, as I'm distracted, short attention span theater, I'm looking at some posts, and guys hate it, especially old guys hate it when you wax esoteric or sensitively about your dealings in combat or share some feelings. I think it's a generational thing. I don't know. Maybe it's a individual thing. But I think sharing that stuff is important. And the one comment, some guy was like, I'd rather have a psychopath watching my back than, someone who's Mr. Sensitive. I'm like, really? Like, you want a psychopath in your squad? Is that a guy you want to go to combat with? I don't know. But when you interview these guys, I'll pitch this one over to Phil. Do you find that you are looking to really dig deep into these guys you interview who served in whatever job it is in the military? Like, are you looking to find that new pearl of wisdom from these guys and girls?
Yeah, I mean, I guess having done it now for over a year and talked to some pretty significant guys, everybody from, grunts on the ground that, did the surge era of Iraq to all the way back to the Korean War. I've talked to some really great guys, 2 former POWs in Korea held in captivity for 2 freaking years.
Yeah.
What I found most valuable is when if I can do enough bio research and find out who they are, so we can just have a casual conversation about like who they are as a guy, where they grew up, some small talk. I find if I can just get to the point of friendship enough to say, all right, man, we're done BSing here. Tell me a story. I've rarely been disappointed when once I get the trust of my interview and once I get the good, vibe going, if I just say, tell me a story, I don't even have to prompt for wisdom. I don't have to prompt for leadership sound bites. Whatever story they're dying to tell comes out. And I think that, especially for our grandparents' generations, the guys that fought in, before Nam and that Korean era, those guys are just dying to impart something to you, and they're so honored that you'll listen.
Yeah.
And I think when you can just roll audio on that and say, tell me a story, everybody's got one to tell. Scott's got one too many. Pete's got some ones that are probably inappropriate and we shouldn't share.
Probably.
But, I mean, everybody's got one story they really are dying to get off their chest, and I've been lucky enough to get a microphone and the keys to unlock it. So
this is coming from the guy who's creating like the sweat in beneath his bare ass and the seat he's sitting on. I don't know. Is it fabric or leather that you're on doing this episode naked?
Naked.
What do you? Can you see through the phone? I'm freaking on a leather couch.
Yeah, just like I don't really want to paint that picture for listeners of this episode, but they can see a snapshot of Phil on social media though.
So, okay, look, as a guy that preps for interviews, I'm looking into people's background, Scott, or whoever, and I've done enough prep that a lot of my prep is done before I've even talked to the person, because I know what to do once I'm in front of them. But when I'm digging in, like I know you like to do, like when you looked into the thing that I wrote about my 9/11 story, when do you know you've got it? Like, I used to have to work really hard and talk out loud about what I was trying to do until I felt comfortable with my own uncertainty. And I've gotten past that, but there's still a time where I know, okay, I've got it. I'm no longer worried about it. And the interview, even if it doesn't go that way, I know it's going to be fine. What's your point like that? How do you know?
Well, I think every good reporter or every good podcaster or every good storyteller, if that's what you're trying to get into, you gotta realize that especially if you're interviewing somebody else and it's not like your own story that you're telling, but if you're trying to pull interviews out of somebody, you realize that there will be a couple moments of uncomfortable silence. There will be a couple moments that you just have to let happen. And usually if you ask a question and you don't get the answer you're looking for, you just kind of maybe ask it a different way. and you let there be some silence. And then usually at some point in time with almost every interview I've ever done, there's that moment when it turned from the first time you asked the question to the second time. And as they started talking, you could just hear the sound bites happen. And I'll give you an example. I just did one with this former SEAL, Remy Adeleke, who went on to be in the movie Transformers, and he's like a underwear model. I mean, dude's too freaking handsome, and I almost don't like him because he's that good looking. But
that's what I say about you.
Yeah, I think I said too much about me there. Damn it. Okay, so we were talking, and I was going through the bio interview, and it was getting really mechanical. It was like, oh, I did this, and then a director called me and was like, would you like to read for this movie? And then I got the movie, and I was like, God, this guy's life just seems to work. I mean, he went from poverty and such, but he became a special operator, and he was great at his job. I was waiting for the real harsh part about this. Like, where's the drama? Where's the soundbite? Where does the story really get good? Because right now it's too predictable. And I asked him something about, like, just off the cuff. I was like, hey, man, I noticed something about faith. It seems to be kind of a big part of your life. I was like, did that help you get through some dark times when you were in this, when you were on the team? And he stopped, and there's this weird pause, and he's like, I didn't believe in God when I was a SEAL. And I was like, what? And from there on out, it turned, and it got so cool. He told me how after he got out and he was having these problems, and of course we all know disproportionately the guys that see combat have, some headspace stuff. I mean, you see some stuff you don't want to see, you do some shit that's tough to do, and it takes a toll. And as it took a toll on Remy, it brought him to the point that so many of our brothers get to, want to take your own life. And falling on his knees, praying to God, looking to the sky, saying, please, if you are out there, help me. I will do whatever you want. Get me through this because I have children and I do not want to feel this anymore. If you are real, talk to me. And he said from there on out, he felt it. He felt the force tell him inside, continue what you're doing, get out of the Navy, and go be an inspiration to millions. And he did. And he actually, one thing after another, suddenly made sense after he told me that story. But it wasn't until the second time I asked the question that I actually started to hear the soundbite open up. And it's a beautiful thing when you can get somebody on the line and they just pour their soul into a comment, and you're just like, wow, that's freaking magic. And I just captured it.
When those moments happen, as a collector of stories, we start to realize that when someone has that level of truth, that level of clarity, and they share it with you, you can't say, I don't believe in God. Like, you have to go, wow, if this person has that much of a change in life, if they can hear that message, and I'm not talking about God specifically, whatever that thing is, I always find myself asking, one, what the heck do I even know? And two, how am I missing what they got? Like, whatever that moment of clarity is, whatever that, that perspective that they give to you, you're just like, that's completely reasonable, or that's completely incredible. You're sort of, I find myself able to sit back and be a lot more reflective and consider a lot more perspectives. Like, we had this stupid thing last night with the wall where President Trump is talking about the wall and people are like going crazy because he's talking about the wall. And then people are going crazy because Senator Schumer and Speaker Pelosi are talking about how immoral walls are. Like, none of that matters to me in my life right now. Like, that stuff's sort of important, but there are so many more things that should be so much more important. There's so much more clarity to be gained rather than picking a side in that stupid conversation.
Yeah. And I think that's what our key is to do with storytelling, which is why I'm glad you guys kind of encouraged me to do this, and why, Scott, you came on my show initially and I kept doing them, and you've given me leads on other military guests, guys with great experiences. I think that while I used to kid myself that, well, I'm just a storyteller, I'm just Uncle Filthy, I'm just telling dick jokes in the morning, that's what my role in life is.
You do like dick jokes.
Uncle Filthy.
I really do. I mean, I go straight for the gutter with jokes. But I think the role of storyteller is one that's pretty important. And I think that without them, nothing any of these guys have ever done gets translated. And that's why I'm glad that you guys kind of brought me into your world and told me or let me know that telling stories is good enough. In fact, it's probably one of the greatest gifts we can give, because at the end of the day, we can't be war fighters on the ground forever.
Yeah.
But your experiences will affect people that may never actually strap on the boots.
True confession time from Pete to Phil. My default encouragement to anybody who says, I'm thinking about doing this, is to encourage them to do that thing. So you could have said, I'm thinking about going pro in pumpkin carving, and I would have said, you'd be crazy if you didn't. So I appreciate you giving me credit, but really I just gave you the standard. I want anyone to create whatever it is that they think they need to do. I want them to get started on the journey, because you don't end up at the Louisiana champion of pumpkin carving. You end up somewhere totally different. Even if you're at that same table, the journey totally changes who you are and how you see the world. So I won't take too much credit for doing it. You actually did the hard part of actually getting up, grabbing your ruck and going and doing the work. And that's to your credit. I just, like I said, give you the standard advice that I give everybody: go create something.
Well, you were much nicer than Scott. Scott actually told me he wasn't certain I had a future in this, and I might consider maybe something else. He sent me a couple job postings that
checker at Arby's and stuff.
I constantly send him HR links on email. Like, you might want to check this out.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, you might want to get into this line of work. No, but I love that, and we've talked about this, is being a voice for those that don't have the capacity to share their stories. And not everybody does. Not everybody has to spill their guts in a book or write an op-ed or start a podcast. But if you can just capture one piece of their life or their service that's important to them, something that they really remember, and it's emblematic, I mean, that's such a huge thing, because we're always talking about this in our circles in entertainment and media, is you have to be the voice for the veteran community. And if we're not going to build this coalition of veteran artists and storytellers and be the ones that are this conduit to share these stories, they're never going to get heard. And that's just truth. And if people think they're going to get heard and they wait around, they're going to wind up exactly like other generations of warfighters, like World War II, Korea, Vietnam, where they're like, man, I wish someone would have told my story. I wish we had podcasts back in Korea. They're just not being told. So you got to do it. And I love Pete's message and yours when you talk to anyone transitioning. I get these emails and DMs, and I got one on LinkedIn from a friend of mine, and I said, hey, so what are you going to do when you retire next summer? He had no idea.
Yeah.
No fucking clue what he's doing. I said, so you spent your whole career leading Marines, you're a colonel, and yet you have no idea what you're going to do when you get out. And I said, look, what did you want to do when you were a kid besides being a Marine or a soldier or a sailor or whatever? And he's joking around, and he says, oh, I was thinking about being an underwear model for Calvin Klein. I said, great, do it.
Do it.
I totally know a guy who got his leg blown off, and he's an underwear model for Jockey Underwear. His name's Chris Van Etten. He's now an actor in Hollywood. He lives across the street from me. But he's doing it because he said, yep, that's what I want to do. Or he jumped on the opportunity. So nothing is out of the reach. If you want to be a pumpkin carver,
yeah,
you're right. Start carving, bitch.
Get to carving. Yeah. But it's true though, right, Phil? I mean, look at the journey you've been on. What have you picked up along the way? I mean, I know you and I talked about podcasting, and I gave you the standard thing I tell people, but what did you pick up along the way that you're like, holy shit, look at this thing that I have now, this enrichment? What was that?
Well, before I talk about what I picked up along the way, I just want you to know. Hold on a second. I'm putting my shirt back on. There is no way I can be an underwear model, guys. I was just giving it the good look, and I got to lose a couple pounds. And by a couple, I think I need to lose like 25 pounds. Yeah.
Is there a Lane Bryant for men?
Right. Yeah, we're the plus size men model.
Come on, there's a future for everybody.
Yeah.
The big and tall. I'm what you call a husky model.
Yeah, big and tall. Let's underline the big 3 times, and Phil and Pete are going to do a pictorial. Like, this is how you make the top of your underwear roll over. You have this kind of body. It's so hot.
Gross. And Huesing has left the studio.
Husky. Yeah, that was my jean size growing up. Now, what did I pick up along the way? I guess really that if I were to, I would never give anybody advice, but I mean.
This episode of the Break It Down Show is brought to you by Lions Rock Productions.
That's us.
We publish, evaluate, and develop podcasts just like this one, consult others to build their own, and create associated content and content marketing strategies.
So if you're launching or expanding your social media presence, your business, or your personal brand, or if you just want to take your media presence to the next level,
reach out to us on Twitter
at Pete A. Turner
or at JohnLG69
at the Break It Down Show.
There's 1,000 ways to get a hold of us.
Now
I guess really that if I were to, I would never give anybody advice, but I mean, I think deep down inside, like Scott said, there's something that everybody kind of always wanted to do, and you should do it. You should find a way to get that done. You should draw upon that, and even if it's not for professional gain or for money, sometimes just doing stuff is fun. Like I'm never gonna. Who's the guy? Josh Collins that paddleboarded from like Texas to. No, he did the Alaska race too.
Alaska, yeah. He's in, yeah. Did you interview him?
Former Green Beret, anyway. Dude's a warfighter. Dude's just phenomenal American and totally inspiring with his paddling. How paddleboarding actually helped him recover from his TBI because after so many blast injuries from warfighting and security contracting, his head was spun and he ended up becoming this epic paddleboarder where they made a movie about. I look at that and I say I live near this lake, right? And I own a couple paddleboards. And I'm on that thing, and my fat ass is trying to, like, keep it straight. And, I feel pretty impressive if I can go 25 yards and not fall. But when I'm on that thing, it just feels good. Yeah. And I think we are so stuck in this world right now where, like, social media makes you feel bad, and arguing makes you feel bad, and politics makes you feel bad. What I've learned from all the warfighters and the enrichment I've gotten from all these guys and doing all these interviews is that there is something that makes you feel good. And when you do that, whether it's being a dad, whether it's being a paddleboarder, whether it's being a one-legged underwear model, I mean, whatever the hell you want to do, man, it's in there. And as soon as you engage with that and you do it, you actually feel better in life. And I think that's really what we're all looking for is like a way to feel kind of better. And sometimes it's within us and we don't act on it. And that's probably what we should all be concentrating on doing. Go be the dad you want to be. Make an extra hour to go paint something if you want, Yeah. Just take the time because life is short, brother. You don't always get, all the minutes you want.
Yeah, I would say you don't ever get the minutes. Well, like even if you live a long time, at some point, what you could do and what you will do are no longer in balance, right? Like you only have so many things you're going to be able to accomplish. So you're right. Get out and go do whatever it is. And if it's not that, then find the next it and do it and repeat until you figure it out. What advice should I have given you prior to you launching your podcast? What did I miss out on?
What advice should... Well, you should have told me that, like, one, there is absolutely no way to get this right. You are never you're never gonna get it right. I keep thinking one of these episodes is gonna be right. I'm like, God, was the Echo and Ramadi episode good? I mean, Scott sounded kind of good, but it was probably too freaking long and he talked too much.
Right.
This episode is absolutely an example of what not to do. But that's for another episode.
Freeform.
More HR websites are coming your way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you, man. And the cafeteria link you sent me the other day, they're not hiring, and I'm overqualified to serve frickin' cafeteria food, by the way. Just that it's virtually impossible to get right. Like I have a podcast project that I can't talk about yet, but it's coming up later in 2019. And it's going to be a documentary, and it's done with one of the larger podcast publishers in the country, actually. You may hear one of our friends here on this call on the show as well, Mr. Scott Huesing. But before I even got the up to talk to this major publisher, there was no right way to reach them. I tried it all, Pete. I was like, I emailed, I made bios, I sent little demos. I was like, what do you think of this shiny thing? Do you know how I got it? I crashed a freaking cocktail party in Philadelphia.
Huh.
I literally went to a party I was not invited to. There was a Q&A with a speaker, and I grabbed the microphone from one of the employees, and I was like, I have a question.
The question was?
This all transpired like Phil's walking me through this whole episode, and the whole time he's telling me this story is, I'm thinking risk. He's assuming risk, but he's willing to do it instead of thinking about it and saying, I wish I did this. I should have. Like, no, you got to have that capacity as well to take some risks. And I mean, look how it paid off. If you just didn't think outside the box a little bit, we use that colloquialism a lot in the military. Think outside the box. Like, whatever, smash the fuck out of the box. I don't care.
Yeah.
I think it's for entrepreneurs, for guys that are running their own business, for guys that are artists, or whatever it is you're doing. I mean, the latest one, someone hit me up to create your own success. Said, hey, how'd you wind up getting in Soldier of Fortune magazine? And for me, that's better than being in the New York Times. Like, Soldier, every one of us grew up reading Soldier of Fortune magazine with Rambo on it. I'm like, to get, in that, people, so the guy says, well, how'd you do that? I think it may have been my publisher. I don't know. But I said, I emailed them. Like, I was sitting around thinking, hey, this is a free tip for any writers or anyone for this matter. This is how it's done. Like Phil, crashing a party, grabbing the mic and going gonzo. I just Googled military magazines. 20 of them pop up. I emailed 10 of them. 3 of them emailed me back. We'd love to run it. So I sent them the stuff. Like, it's not rocket science, man, but you got to put the work in. And you got to be willing to risk a little embarrassment in front of a strange crowd, or getting a rejection letter via email. What does that cost you? You don't even know the person sending it. So just hit the garbage can button and move on. Yeah. But I mean, that's a great example. And this next project you got going on is not only going to be instrumental in helping share more great stories, but it takes you to another level. So I think it's really shit hot.
Super cool, man. I'll remember all you guys when I'm big and in Hollywood and, sitting on my leather couch and nothing but an ascot and Asian supermodel next to me.
Yes, of course.
Who plays Phil Briggs in any feature film?
Oh, nice. Okay. What about, who plays Stu in The Hangover? That guy right there.
Bradley Cooper.
No, not Bradley Cooper. The dentist guy. I mean, yes, sorry,
he
Phil.
He plays Bill.
Yeah.
Bill.
Whatever that guy's name is. What's his name? Who plays the dentist in the Hangover? Come on, Phil. Who is it?
I know exactly who you're talking about. And Ed Helmsley?
Ed Helms.
Yeah.
Ed Helms. Okay. There you go. That's good. He can pull it off. Handsome guy. Willing to go the extra yard and have his tooth yanked out of his head for the part. I like it. Stu.
Right on, guys. Well, I appreciate you both, man. I actually got to bounce because I think hold on. Oh, yeah, that's definitely a diaper. Yeah. My kid just literally had a blowout. I mean, this is toxic. You talk about the wag bag of life, Scott. Let me tell you, dude, I don't know if your wag bags were this nasty. This thing is full.
Okay, see how it devolves?
Yeah, right back in every
episode.
Yeah. Well, listen, thanks for coming on. Let's do some more. And, just appreciate what you're doing, that you're out there telling these stories and having success, having folks saying, give us more of this stuff, man. That's so fantastic to see that kind of success, really.
Well, we're looking to get it done in 2019. I got 2 of them running now called Vet Story. You can look at that. That's in every place podcasts are. And then a new one called the CV Report for Connecting Vets. And you can find them all at connectingvets.com. So quick shout out, and I appreciate you guys for letting me plug it. And I'll be talking to both you guys really soon.
All right, brother. Semper Fi.
Take care, man.
Right on, man. Keep up the good work, guys. See you soon.